Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining Women Against Gun Violence, our Lunch and Learn focusing on effective activism. Women Against Gun Violence was founded 30 years ago, and since that time, we've worked tirelessly to prevent the gun violence epidemic in our communities, in our state, and throughout the nation, through both our program work on safe gun storage, on voting, and on divestment, as well as by advancing impactful legislation like background checks for all gun and ammunition sales. Our work has been and continues to be a model for communities across the United States. Today, we will be presenting you with information on how to make your voice heard and to impact change both from your home and from the street. The presenters today are Loren Lieb, the chair of the Board of Women Against Gun Violence, and a much published letter writer to the Los Angeles Times. Loren will focus on armchair activism. And Donna Finkelstein, a board member of Women Against Gun Violence and a regular public speaker on gun violence prevention, who will focus on what I call boots on the ground activism. And I'm Margot Bennett, the executive director of Women Against Gun Violence, and I will be talking about in-person meetings with elected officials. So before we move on and get started officially, a little housekeeping. Please make sure you're on mute. We will be taking questions at the end of today's Lunch and Learn. Please post them in the chat. And then later this week, the slideshow will be distributed to you via email, along with a link to the recording of this Lunch and Learn on our YouTube channel. If we run long, let's see, okay, here we go. If we run long, we're going to continue to present even as you drop off, and then we will make that whole recording available to you. So if you feel like you must leave the presentation, that's fine. We're going to continue on. If you don't have a chance to have your questions answered in the chat, we'll answer them via email and also on the recording. So now I'd like to welcome Loren Lieb. Take it away, Loren. You're on mute.
Hey, I remembered to unmute. All right. Okay, so hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here. And yeah, so the beauties of armchair activism, you can do it on your schedule when it's convenient for you, wherever you happen to be, whenever you want to do it, at home, in your car, in your comfy clothes. So I'm going to just quickly run through what some of the types of things you can do. Next slide, Margot. Okay, so I'm going to briefly be touching on these actions you could take, giving a few tips on writing letters to the editor, being a media and social media watchdog, and participating in the legislative process, all from your own home. Next slide. So writing letters to the editor, it's a great way to provide feedback on print media. When you're writing a letter, you can be showing your support for an article, you can be providing other points of view. When I read an article about gun violence in the paper, if it's something that makes me gasp in despair, shake my head, feel angry or frustrated, or I'm left wondering about information, that's when I say, I got to write a letter about this. So some of the important things, what might be in an article or missing from an article that would make you want to write a response. So one thing that we really focus on is whether or not the article leaves out some really important information, which is, how did the shooter get the gun? I mean, that is something we're really working hard on, trying to kind of train the media to ask that question: where are they getting the gun from? Because oftentimes, it helps point out what loopholes there are in our policies and procedures that are allowing people who shouldn't have guns to get them. And the media seems to be doing a slightly better job on this. And in their defense, oftentimes the first articles that come out, it's very early in the investigation and they don't really know, they don't have all the information about where the gun came from. But, that could be a follow-up letter too. Like, let's hear more about where the gun came from. And does the article focus unnecessarily on stuff that's not meaningful, like the shooter's motive? We hear this that is often the focus of what the articles are, is why did the shooter do it, and wanting to know their motive. It's not the motive that matters. We don't want to talk about the shooter. We don't need to know about the shooter. What we need to know is, where did the gun come from? Does the article leave a place where we could talk about opportunities for prevention? Do we want to call attention to safe storage programs or relinquishment requirements that might have disarmed a person in an emotional crisis? So we always want to focus on that and have an opportunity to bring attention to a prevention program, like WAGVA has, the Talk Project, I had a blank moment there in my head, to talk about safe gun storage. And also, it's really important that we train the news media to adhere to no notoriety. And No Notoriety is a program that was started in 2012 by Karen and Tom Teves, whose son was murdered in the Aurora Theater massacre in Colorado. So the premise is that mass shooters are seeking infamy and notoriety, and that one mass shooting inspires another mass shooting. So really what we need to do is keep these people, we keep their names out of the media, we need to keep their photos out of the media. There needs to be no notoriety surrounding the shooter. And if you want any more information about the no notoriety problem, you can go to nonotoriety.com. Next slide, please. As Margot mentioned, I have been able to get a few letters to the editor in the Los Angeles Times. And this is, I don't remember when this one was published, but I just want to read a little bit of it to you. Predictably, after yet another high-profile shooting in America, attention is focused on the shooter's motive. Does the shooter's motive matter? Is there a motive that would make this latest mass shooting acceptable? Rather than pondering why he did it, shouldn't the first question be how he did it? How did the shooter acquire a tool of mass murder? How do our lax gun control policies enable mass shootings to continue unabated? How can we lessen the likelihood of the next mass murder? So anyway, I just happened to be looking for a sample of a letter, and I found that this one kind of really followed the steps that I had outlined in the previous slide. So I thought I would share it. So we can go to the next slide. So if you decide that you're moved by something, aggravated by something, or you want to do a little education of the paper editorial board, you can check the publication guidelines on their website and adhere to them. The best thing to do is respond quickly. If you read an article that you think needs a response, you really need to get on it pretty quickly. I don't have time to write in response to every article that I think needs a letter, but if I have time and I can do it within the first day, I try to send them in. You need to edit your own writing really judiciously, and some papers will edit yours if they feel it's necessary. They try to keep your tone and intent there, but they do a little wordsmithing sometimes. But also, proof carefully. If you send in a good quality product, you're in a better place. And don't be discouraged. The competition for space is fierce. Think about the Los Angeles Times. They get hundreds and the next slide. Oh, okay, so here's some information, just some samples of where you find places to write letters to the editor. So I've fully acknowledge it can be kind of tricky sometimes on print media websites to find the information about how to write a letter and where to submit. So this is from the Los Angeles Times. And I think it might be under the About Us section on their website. I don't remember. Opinion submissions to the editor. But like I say, when you're searching around the website, it can be a little tricky to find it. But so they have a form that you fill out where you provide all your contact information, and a space for you to put your letter in. Now it says in the instructions that, that they should be 150 words or less. It may be edited. The last line there about you'll be contacted if your letter is a candidate for publication, that doesn't apply anymore. They never contact you. You have to run to the paper every morning and look and see if your letter got in there, or if one of your friends called you and said, hey, great letter in the paper today, because they do not contact you about in advance of publishing a letter. But so this is what it looks like for the LA Times. Next slide. I did a little searching around to see some of the other papers. The Southern California News Group manages 11 daily newspapers in Southern California. So the ones more local to me, the LA Daily News, the Pasadena Star News, the Long Beach Press Telegram, the San Gabriel Valley Tribune. So those are all papers you might consider. Some of the smaller papers, the competition is a little less fierce. I mean, I will admit the LA Times is very difficult to get into the LA Times, but some of these other papers, it's a lot easier. So here's the link for submitting something to the Daily News. And they say there that they welcome letters. Submissions are subject to editing and condensation. Please limit submissions to 150 words and send via email. And they just have an email where you send your letter, opinions@scng.com. So, the LA Times has a form. The Daily News just has an email address that you send your submission to. So if there's, other papers in your area that you're interested in, just spend a little time cruising their website and find out how you submit to them. Okay, next slide. So there were a couple other comments. I was just going to say before I move away from the letters to the editor, again, don't be discouraged. I mean, I wrote letters to the editor for years before I ever had one published. And I remember a friend and I we'd talk to one another and say, okay, I'm going to do it. I wrote one. I'm just going to send it. I'm going to send it. What do you think? Should I send it? Like, I don't know why we worried so much about sending these letters. Like, send it. If it gets published, it does. If it doesn't, okay, but you've made your opinions known to the editors of the paper. And, when you think about it, the LA Times a few years back, they used to do like a weekly summary of the letters that they received, where they would summarize about how many letters they received and what were the top topics that the letters were on. So it was really kind of eye-opening to realize that they receive hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters every week. And if you think about, they can publish a handful of them each day in the paper. So like I say, competition is fierce. Don't get discouraged. Just keep doing it. It's great it's fun to have it published, but that's not the ultimate goal to get it in the paper. We also doing this big education component with the editors of the paper. Okay, so being a social media watchdog. This is quite similar to, writing letters to the editors, same kind of thing of why you would feel that you had to contact a television news media or an online news source. Same kinds of reasons, if you feel that they've left something out of their story, if they've been misleading about the story. And it starts kind of pretty much the same way, where you got to go to their website and try to figure out how you provide feedback to them. Next slide. So these are few places I started looking for online to see. So MSNBC, and like I say, takes a bit of searching to find it, but there is a space placed on their website to report an error or comment. Please email them. So you just, say, why are you showing so many pictures of the shooter in every one of your stories? You show the shooter's picture 5 times. You should be aware of no notoriety, that it's dangerous. It encourages copycats, that kind of thing. Send it off. Give them your opinion. Let them educate them about something and hope they deal with it. The local NBC affiliate, they have a space on their website. If you have comments, concerns, tips, just want to get in touch, use the form below. We value your thoughts, opinions, and ideas, and we'll do everything we can to take your thoughts on board. So this is another, you could do any news source. You could find some information similar to this on their website, how to be in touch with them. And the same principles apply as well for social media. On any social media accounts that you follow, it's important that you like things that you read on social media, that you comment about them. If you like them, hit the like button. If you don't like them, make a comment as to why you don't like it, what they're doing wrong, share it with friends. Just comment and express your opinions, because our opinions really do matter. And again, all along the way, you're educating people that are reading your comments and thinking about what you have to say. So Women Against Gun Violence has social media accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We have a YouTube channel. So you can find the links to all of WAGVA's social media accounts on the website at wagv.org. You should follow them, like them, share them, and engage and respond if you have other comments to make about some of the social media content. Next slide. The other thing we can be doing from the comfort of our own home is participating in the legislative process by commenting either in support or opposition on local, state, or federal pending legislation. COVID actually made some of this a little bit easier, since in-person meetings weren't happening. So legislators had to pivot to an online process and a video process and a call-in process to be able to provide testimony. So that became more common during COVID. I'm not going to lie, it can be a very cumbersome process when you're trying to call in. You get put in these phone queues, and it might take hours. So this calling in and commenting on legislation is not for everybody. You do have to have some time to sit on the phone and wait your turn, and then the technology doesn't always work. But if you have some time, it can be extremely important to really provide a verbal response about some legislation. The government process for legislation, there has to be public components to this where the public is able to comment on issues. So this is especially important when legislation is being voted on in a committee, or when the full body is taking a vote on a piece of legislation, that we have an opportunity to say, thank you for voting I urge you to vote in favor of this, or I strongly oppose this legislation and I urge you to vote no. There's ways of doing this. You can, call on the phone if they have a call-in system. Sometimes it does have to be in person, so that doesn't fall into the armchair activism piece. But if you for local and state legislation, there very frequently is a way to call in. There's other ways as well. I'm sure you've all seen online petitions that get circulated. Very, very simple to just plug your name on to the end of this petition. Generally, the way they work is there's a standard template that's provided. You can customize it to add or modify it however you like, a way that expresses your opinion better or uses your own voice in a better way. Online petitions are a valuable thing, but we do hear from legislators that they do not carry as much weight as a real personal phone call to their office talking about support or opposition to a particular bill, or writing a real letter that you put in the mail and send snail mail. If you're sending to Washington, D.C. offices, which I would always suggest sending to their D.C. office, to a legislators for federal legislation, sending to their D.C. office rather than their district office, the information gets to the people who need to know it more quickly. But another important thing to think about is the security process that mail goes through when it arrives at the Capitol building. And you know, they scan them for, I don't know, for ricin and other things that might get sent via the mail. So if you can send a postcard rather than something that's in an envelope, it gets through the screening process more quickly. So if you have something you want to say, jot it on the back of a postcard, send it to the DC office, and you're good to go. And another thing to think about is, you know, these do not have to be long, detailed letters. Nobody wants to read a long, detailed letter or hear a long, detailed comment if you call into a legislator's office to say, I support this or I oppose this. They want to know your opinion. Which way do you stand on it? They're making a hash mark tally to keep track of what the calls are that they're getting. So you can do it fairly quickly. Phone calls are very important, though, whether it's local, state, or federal. Next slide. I'm sorry that my phone is ringing in the background. So a few things to think about here with, you know, when you're trying to participate with a local ordinance or state legislation. Again, it's in accordance with hearings and voting schedules, the opportunity for you to voice your support or opposition. You have to pay careful attention to deadlines, because often with a committee meeting, comments have to be submitted in advance, written comments, they have to be submitted in advance. There may be an online portal to submit your written comment. And there would also be instructions for how you comment either in person or by telephone. When you are making a comment by telephone or in person, there are very strict time limits on how long your comment can be, and they will cut you off if you exceed your time limit. You know, it's generally you can have 2 minutes, and if you go beyond your 2 minutes, either the microphone is shut off, or they just say thank you, they move on to the next person. You can be mid-sentence and they'll terminate your comment. So it's really best to write your comment down first, practice it, make sure that you can deliver it within the time limit. But also, again, be sure you do your research first to know what the requirements are, what you have to do to engage in this process. Next slide. So here's a little pro tip. If you sign up for WAGVA's action alerts at WAGB, all of a sudden that sounded wrong, .org. So you'll know when action is needed, because that's what our action alerts are all about. Like, here's what's coming up and here's what we need you to do. And a pro tip, WAGVA provides you with sample talking points, because it can be intimidating. I understand the first time you call a legislator's office, if you're not familiar with doing it, it can feel a little awkward, a little strange, but really you just need to call and say, hi, you know, my name is, I'm a constituent, I'm calling about this bill and I support it because XYZ. I hope you'll vote in favor. Thank you, goodbye. These actions then are time sensitive, but most of them don't take much time. You can do it, you know, you can make a phone call in the middle of the night. It goes to their voicemail, so they'll get it in the morning. Again, the beauty of armchair activism is you do it when it's convenient for you, and doesn't take much time. And it's just really important for people to, I believe, get a stronger sense of how important your own voice is. I know it's so easy to say, well, I'm not going to call. I'm just one person. What difference does it make if I call? It doesn't really matter. Well, you're one, and the next person is one, and the next person is one, and they all add up. And the most important thing to know is that we hear frequently from legislators that the other side is more organized about calling in and making their voice heard over and over and over again. So they're doing it. We need to counter that narrative with what we think is important. So every single call really does matter. So I hope I've given you a few things to think about in terms of armchair activism, what you can do on a Saturday, what you can do in your pajamas, what you can do in the middle of the night, what you can do while you're sitting in a car waiting to pick up a kid from school, what you can do, all different times of the day or night. But whatever it is, they're all important. We all have to do something. We can't sit back and expect other people to do all the work. There's a role for everybody in this movement. So that's what I have to say. And thank you very much for your attention.
So let me introduce to you now, Donna, our board member, who's going to talk about boots on the ground. Donna, take it away.
Thank you, Margot. So now I'm going to talk about boots on the ground, meaning that I'm out and about, except for COVID, of course. Next slide, please. So thinking about an issue, so Loren talked about, an immediate issue that she read about in the paper, something like that. Before you actually take steps, do some research. If you are angry about a mass shooting or something related to gun violence, do some research. Know what you may be comfortable in talking about, or what is the hot topic for you to really take issue with. So, and then define your goal, because it could be, it's a giant issue. You need to narrow it down to what do you think you're most comfortable focusing on. And choose your methodology. How do you think you could best be out in the community and talking about the issue that you want to talk about? And then you're going to take action. Next slide, please. So in choosing your issue, gun violence prevention, which was my issue that was near and dear to my heart, includes many different sub-issues. So, suicide prevention, safe gun storage, and domestic violence. These are three big issues that I wanted to focus on, but needed to narrow it down because they're all related in some way to, gun violence. So if you're interested in, well, I'll start with myself. Being a high school counselor, I wanted to focus in on suicide prevention and safe gun storage. So I needed to do some research. So safe gun storage to me meant, it's all about prevention. 80% of teens who use a gun to end their life used a firearm belonging to someone in their home. And the majority of K through 12 shootings were committed by minors and where there was knowledge of the gun's origin. And 65% of the shooters used a gun from the home. So being familiar with the school setting and working with teenagers, this was my focus. And, sadly, every year the data increases, but this was my focus so that no other parent would receive that horrific phone call. So it's all about prevention. Next slide, please. Again, my goal was saving lives by making sure that households with children know about the importance of safe gun storage and how it could prevent suicide, school shootings, and unintentional shootings and deaths. So way back when I was, when this was the most important issue for me, it started out in a small way, and then looking at the data and the percentages, it needed to make it a big and stronger issues. So next slide, please. It took me a while to figure out my best method of sharing this information. So I started to ask myself some questions about what would be just suitable for me. And these are the questions that I feel that you need to consider first. Are you comfortable talking to groups? Large groups, small groups? Are you comfortable talking one-on-one? What age groups are you comfortable talking to? Do you feel that you're comfortable answering questions? And do you get intimidated easily? Next slide, please. So going back to my goal, saving lives by making sure that households with children know about the importance of safe gun storage, plus my self-knowledge. So I've been doing this work for close to 23 years, and I now do like talking to big groups and small groups. I'm comfortable talking one-to-one. Now I don't get easily intimidated because I learned from my previous experiences. And I can answer questions or acknowledge that I don't know all of the answers, but then I would get back to the groups with my answers. Next slide, please. My choice to reach out to school district boards to have them distribute safe gun storage information home through the school system and parent handbook. It ended up, this was my goal, to working in a very large school district. I felt that schools is a strong vehicle to get information out to parents. So not only did I reach out to the school district that I work with, but I also reached out to other school districts along with other assistants from other members of the organizations, and using this school system as a vehicle, which it took quite a while, it took many, many years to get them to at least hear me, but things have changed. Next slide, please. You also may choose another methodology that fits better with your interests and skill set. So way back when I started in reaching out about all of these issues that really were disturbing to me, I did participate in many rallies. I also met with many community groups. I did a lot of tabling events, and I started to meet with elected and other policymakers. This took time, and this actually helped me in figuring out what I'm most comfortable doing and presenting. So, and actually through Women Against Gun Violence, we do all of these things. So you can pick and choose what you're comfortable doing. What was most helpful for me personally was being a part of a group at rallies. And I would always tag along with other people who were speaking to community groups so I can listen better and pay attention and focus in better. I would do a tabling event with other participants who were interested in doing what I was doing, and I would listen so that I would understand the issues better, so I could better explain them. And then, of course, I became very comfortable talking to other elected officials and policymakers. And I realized I'm a person, I'm a parent, I'm an individual. And these are important issues. And so I felt very comfortable talking to them. But I always listened while I was doing events with other people. So that got me back to talking also to parent groups, started small and worked my way through to larger groups. Next slide, please. Gun violence prevention groups like Women Against Gun Violence have many opportunities for you to be an activist and will provide you with guidance along the way. Well, this was absolutely true for me. Whenever I wrote a presentation, I would run it by someone from Women Against Gun Violence. I ran it by my husband, my kids, maybe another counselor at school. So I was always, I always practiced and made sure that I stayed within the topic and the parameters and the time limits. So what I also did was I reached out to as many groups as I could who would allow me to speak, because it's just us, you know, reaching out and asking. There were times where Women Against Gun Violence also presented opportunities for us, but really, it's just like the letter writing. You need to reach out and invite yourself to other groups that would allow you to speak. And what I also did with the parent groups is I did role playing with them so that they were comfortable themselves going out and sharing the information to other groups or other parent groups. The most important lesson I learned is staying on topic. It's hard because other participants want to kind of shift your focus and the information you're providing. And you really have to learn how to bring it back politely. A lot of times people in the group listening want to divert your attention. Well, what about this? What about that? What are you doing about this? What are you doing about that? So you really need to stay focused and be on topic. And also, I'd like to leave the groups that I speak to, whether it's on Zoom or in person, with an assignment. I call it a homework assignment, to share the information that you're providing with their family, their friends, their community, so that, you know, you're not just leaving them with a small, just talking to a small group and saying, okay, that's it. You want the information to be shared. Next slide, please. So the key is to take these universal steps. Do your research, which takes time. And there's a lot available research on just Googling. It's an easy way to learn. Choose an issue. Define your goal. Choose your methodology. Choose the ways in which you are willing to share this information. Also, I wanted to add that in the beginning, when I was doing this, I shared a lot of data, and some people just don't pay attention to all of the numbers. So I tried to keep it simple, because sadly, there are huge numbers of people that are affected by gun violence. So I tried to keep it, you know, simple with data. And for me, my methodology was, it took a while to figure out what I was best suited for. And I just practiced. And then to take action. So my issue was safe gun storage and going out into providing information to parents of kids. So I just looked and figured out which ways that I can be best suited to take action. And that was really the most important success that I've had. Next slide, please. Okay, so to conclude, I'm interested in your questions, but I wanted to tell you that before Margot speaks, that Zoom really changed a lot of the ways I can do my presentations. Zoom meetings were easier for me because I didn't have to get out there and drive, and I didn't want to be, of course, out in the public eye either. So I was able to do a lot of Zoom meetings that were not even close by my home. So that was very, very helpful for me getting the word out. And I just went and asked different organizations if I could speak to them. And it was just an easier option. Now we're back in person. So that's what I have for today. And I'm interested in your comments and questions.
Thank you, Donna. We'll be taking questions and comments at the end of the presentation. But right now, I want to talk about in-person meetings with your elected officials. And I'm going to talk about some formal steps, but I also want to share with you a story about a gun violence prevention activist that I know. Her name is Virginia. She was working a table during the holiday season, selling, Christmas things to people. And an elected official that she recognized came up to her table to buy one of her knitted sweaters. And there had just been another school shooting, and Virginia was riled up about it. So here was an elected official, and Virginia was not going to let that opportunity get by her. And so she started speaking with the person, with our California state senator. She talked to him about what concerned her. She talked to him about her ideas. And sure enough, that state senator ended up authoring some legislation based on Virginia's ideas and concerns. He authored the legislation, he shepherded it through our California state legislature, and it became law. So don't ever pass up an opportunity. If you see a state legislature, or even if you see a federal or local small jurisdiction policymaker, make your voice heard. It's always a good opportunity, and they actually welcome it. They welcome the opportunity to hear from their constituents. So why do we suggest one-on-one meetings with legislators? Well, they have the most impact. It's the most effective way of getting your voice heard. Petitions are the least effective. One-on-one meetings or in-person meetings with a delegation, with a legislator or their staff is the most impactful way of getting something done. One of the reasons why it's the most impactful is because it gives an opportunity for two-way communication. They get to ask you questions, you get to ask them questions, and it helps you develop a relationship so that you can call on them in the future with other things that may be concerning you. That relationship is of critical importance. Change is an ongoing process. So we're back to the importance of research and choosing your issue. And gun violence prevention includes many sub-issues. It's very difficult to address gun violence as an overall prevention issue. I highly recommend zeroing in on one of the sub-issues: suicide prevention, or safe gun storage, or domestic violence, or mass shootings, or the types of weapons that are being sold. I encourage you to focus, because your legislator and their staff have a lot going on their desks and in their heads. You're also going to have to do some research to find out who's representing you. If you're addressing a federal issue, you need to find out who represents you in the House of Representatives or in the federal Senate. Find out who your district, where your district office is, and that's where you're going to meet with your elected officials. So the first thing you need to do is find out, choose your issue. The second thing is to request an appointment with your elected official through their district office. And then you create a delegation of your friends and other activists who should be from the district. Here are things you want with the people who are going to come with you. You want people who know how to stay on message, because you may only be getting a few minutes with that elected official or their staff. You want to make sure that your delegation is diverse. Both men and women, young and old, different ethnicities, different religions. You want to find out about your elected officials so somebody on your delegation has something in common with them. And then also find people who have personal stories to share that have to do with the issue that you're going to be discussing. And so I'm telling you, you need to find all these people, but really you can only bring maybe 3 or 4 people, including yourself. So people are going to need to fulfill quite a few roles. And delegate before you go, and maybe even practice what your roles are going to be. So to prepare, you're going to need to designate a leader of your delegation and designate someone who's going to take notes at the meeting. Because you're only bringing a few people, take some time ahead of the meeting to solicit and receive letters of support from others, from clergy, from educators, from other community members, letters that you can give to the staff member or the elected official. Bring articles from newspapers that support your position, and bring with you information available about what other states or local jurisdictions are doing. All of that adds power to your conversation. So you do need to be prepared. You can't show up to a meeting and not really know your topic. But don't be afraid if you're asked something you don't know. You don't have to be an expert on policy, and you don't have to know all the details and the nitty-gritty. You're an expert on your position and why you feel strongly. Couple that expertise with substantive knowledge, knowing that you can't know every single detail, and then be prepared to share. When you're in the meeting, you have to be courteous and respectful, and you have to be appreciative of the time. Now, I have to say that those things are difficult for me. I mean, I have a great deal of respect for my own time. And so, you know, the legislator or their staff may be late to your meeting. And for me, that's always something that kind of sets me off, because I value my own time. But I always have to set that aside, because I have to keep my focus on my goal, which is to convince the legislator to do something on a topic that is important to me. That's more important than me being a little cranky about my time. I always introduce my delegation, the people I've brought with me, and I indicate that there's somebody who's taking notes. Then I make a brief statement about my purpose. Why am I there? Now, they should already know this because when you set up the meeting with their staff, you said, I want to come and discuss suicide prevention and its intersection with gun violence, for example, with the legislator and see how we can all work together to fix this problem or take steps to fix this problem. So they already know this, but you should start your meeting with a brief statement of that purpose and then talk about the issue and present the materials you brought with you, the data that you brought with you, the letters you brought with you from maybe counselors or educators. Listen and answer their questions, ask your questions, and then ask for their support. Talk about what you would like them to do. Maybe it's introduce legislation. But if you're asking them to introduce legislation, one thing you really do need to know is what they've already done on the issue. Because you don't want to show up and say, I really need you to introduce some kind of legislation that will help prevent suicide by gun, and only to find out that they've already introduced something like that and has had it pass. So you do need to have that information. You ask for their support, you exchange contact information, and always take a photo. Like have somebody take a photo with your group. It's great to post and share your activities on social media and with others you know, because it's an encouragement. It's a way to get other people to be activists as well. And then, of course, express your appreciation again as you're leaving and be sure to send a follow-up note appreciating their time. Afterwards, get together with your delegation and talk about what really went well at the meeting and then what could go better. And then come up with some follow-up assignments. Somebody's going to need to contact staff people that were sitting in on the meeting with the legislator to follow up. Has anything happened? I mean, you don't want to do that too soon, but you definitely want to build relationships. And then share any new information you've come across. So perhaps you want to hold, you've accumulated these letters from the community to take with you in support of your issue, and you present them at the meeting. Hold one of them back, because then that way you have a reason to reach out again to the staff that was in the meeting with the legislator, their staff member, and say, we've received this additional letter of support that we want you to have. That gives you a perfect reason to reach out again. Once again, helps build that relationship and helps keep you in the loop. And now I want to give you some activism tools that you can use as an armchair activist or as a boots on the ground activist, or both. We'll be sending you this slideshow, so you'll have these tools. They're also available on our website. But democracy.io lets you send personalized messages to your 2 senators and representative through a single website. And you can just craft one message and it will go to all 3. The Town Hall Project lets you know where your representative is holding a town hall, so you can actually show up and speak out to your legislator. 5calls.org helps you find your representatives, their phone numbers. It presents you with multiple issues and scripts that you can use. And you can also sign up with 5 calls, and they'll send you weekly notices with issues that they think may interest you, and also calls to action that are time sensitive. They're not just gun violence and gun violence prevention. It's many different issues, but gun violence is one of their issues. And then for California, if you want to track California legislation, so let's say you've met with your legislator, they've called you now back and said, guess what? We really liked your input and I've introduced this legislation and here's its number. And then you can go to this site, leginfo.legislature.california.gov, blah, blah, blah. You'll see the whole site when you receive the slideshow via email. And you can actually enter that bill number and see where it is in the process. And then you know that what your legislator is doing, if the bill is undergoing any revisions, and it helps you be more informed should you decide to reach out to the legislator again. And then the next site actually is what they call the legislative portal. And it lets you as an individual submit letters of support for a specific bill. Now, we as Women Against Gun Violence choose several bills to support each legislative session and submit a letter of support through the legislative portal as a nonprofit organization in support or in opposition to some legislation. But you can use that site to make your individual voice heard as well. It's very easy to use. You will have to register with them. So that's it. If there are any questions, somebody asked in the chat, besides action alerts through WAGVA, what is the best way to keep informed regarding pending legislation, especially locally and on the state level? So on really, you can follow many of the different gun violence prevention organizations that are in your state or in your local jurisdiction. You can find out where local jurisdictions are posting their agendas. So for example, Women Against Gun Violence is in Los Angeles County, and LA County Board of Supervisors has boards of supervisor meetings once a week and posts their agendas for their meetings, I think on the preceding Friday. So once a week, we go in and take a look at the agenda to see if there's anything on it regarding our issue of gun violence and gun violence prevention. And that's how we know. We do the same thing with local jurisdictions, such as LA City or the city of Culver City or the city of Burbank. But choose on a local level, choose your city. It's great to start locally and then start checking out their agenda on their website for their meetings. It's time consuming, but it's part of the research. You know, being an activist can be easy, but it can also take time. And the time involved is normally based on the research that you have to do. But once you have that research done, once you're in a routine of, for example, checking your local jurisdiction's agendas, you know, for their upcoming meetings, or nurturing a network of friends or following different websites, the actual part of picking up the phone and testifying or writing the letter won't take you as long as the research that you need to do in the beginning. So I don't want you to be deterred, but there are steps that you need to take to be prepared, because you want to accomplish your goal and you want to encourage others to do that as well. So are there any more questions or comments from the other speakers? I want to remind you all that you'll be receiving an email that will include a link to this recording and also the slideshow presentation. And I want to thank you very much for participating in our Lunch and Learn. Take care, everyone.